Today is March 27th, 2019. I'm Adrienne Felice here with Tom Broecker for the Interviews, an oral history of television, and we are in the costume design office at Saturday Night Live in New York City. Okay. Thank you so much for sitting down with us today, Tom.
Please. Thank you for having me.
So we just want to get some background information to start. So first question is, what was your name at birth?
Thomas Joseph Broecker.
Did you go by Tom?
I go by Tom. According to my mother, I was Thomas until I was about 3 years old, until my grandmother kind of said, Thomas is a really big name for a little person, a little young kid. So then she just went by Tom, and so it just sort of stuck. So
All right.
I'm Tom.
And when and where were you born?
I was born in Indianapolis, Indiana, in the 60s, the early 60s.
And did you grow up there as well?
For the most part, I grew up there. My parents got divorced, so I sort of was back and forth between the East Coast and Indiana until I was 17, 18, and then kind of ventured off to college and eventually left Indiana mid-'80s.
Okay.
Came to New York and sort of have lived New York, LA, kind of since then.
So what were some of your interests when you were little?
I guess when I was little, art was a big thing. You know, it's funny because a lot of this comes just by way of talking about family or being home or any of those sort of things where, like, there's certain things I remember, certain things I don't. I know that art was a big thing because I have a couple books that are how to draw animals, how to draw this, how to draw that. I also, for a while I was really into the idea of becoming a doctor. So I know that that was a big thing. I played, when we were growing up, I played tennis for a really long time. And then eventually, freshman and junior high-ish kind of thing, I started dancing. So I started spending a lot of time in the dance studio and danced kind of until late 20s, maybe.
What kind of dance?
I studied ballet because you have to learn foundations and that sort of stuff. But because I started late, I wasn't ever really going to be a big-time dancer. And also, and then it just became like kind of jazz, Broadway. Not really, it wasn't modern, so it just sort of was that kind of precursor. And this is before shows like So You Think You Can Dance, and there wasn't that kind of avenue to pursue. These were so, and the truth be told, and I was a little bit of a performer, so the truth is that I never kind of was a little bit of a performer, but not really. I was more interested in the process than I was the actual performance. So rehearsal and that kind of stuff was more interesting to me than the actual let's perform for the people. And if you're a performer who doesn't like to perform for people, then there's no real point in being a performer. So I kind of always knew that I ultimately wasn't going to be a performer, but I gave my time and I gave myself permission to kind of explore a little bit of what that meant. And when I first came to New York.
What did you like about the rehearsal kind of behind the scenes process?
Well, I really like most of, and this is partially a costume designer, this idea of processing information about things and about people and how it gets made and how things work and how people in particular, as a costume designer, that process of how people work is fascinating to me, and what makes them work and tick. And I think all of that information informs how you dress somebody then. Like as a costume designer, you're a visual storyteller and you're using, psychology and sociology and anthropology and history and art and fabrics and all these things you have to combine into creating a character. And to me, that was really interesting. That was much more interesting than just sort of like, okay, here now, smile and start dancing and, perform for the people. That kind of idea of how that person and what their relationship is to the environment and what their relationship is to the other people, and how you tell the story of those people in that environment. And it's all very specific for that particular thing. And that to me was just sort of super interesting. It was a way to kind of combine everything I wanted to ever do eventually. It took me a while to kind of get there, but the thing that's so great about costume design, it sort of did and does combine everything I like into one job. It combines, like I said before, the psychology of people, the clothes, the anthropological history of people, and it also involves reading and text and history, and just learning about a lot of different things to help you create. And when you can use all of those things in order to create something, that's the thing that's fascinating.
So when did that interest in costume and fashion start to solidify?
That's a really good question. Like, I vaguely remember probably midway through college. Like, I started college thinking I was going to be a doctor. Like, I wanted to be a child psychiatrist. And so my first year of college, I took pre-med and all that kind of stuff, and then was just like, oh, this isn't for me. And the life of living in a lab was not for me, and being chained to a desk and all of that kind of stuff. And so I took that idea of child psychology and sort of began to sort of be like, oh, what other job could I do with that, or what sort of. And so I think eventually what ended up happening was just moment by moment, class by class, they're just in talking to other people, it just sort of became, oh wait, there is this whole other profession. And it was different back then than it is today. There wasn't a lot of, oh, costume designers do this and this is what it is. I mean, today I think there's a lot more talk about design and with fashion and the influence of fashion on film and television and all that sort of stuff. There wasn't that kind of dialogue going on every day about this kind of job when I grew up. So I think eventually, I don't know exactly how it happened, but it just kind of happened. I went, oh, that's I should start studying that, because that's a way to kind of do something I love.
So you were able to major in design in college?
Well, ultimately, my major I was in liberal arts, and so I studied theater and art. So sort of tangentially, it wasn't until I went back to graduate school where it finally was like, oh wait, going back to graduate school was sort of like, oh no, this is how you properly do it.
So when you graduated college, what was the plan? What was your career
So path? My career path was basically, the trajectory was, okay, give yourself 5 years to kind of do whatever you want to do. Experience life, do everything. I'm a true believer in don't say no to anything, particularly when you're first starting out. Because I think everything sort of, whether you think it makes sense or not, or whether you think that building block can attach itself to that building block, which can then attach itself to that one. I don't think it's so linear in this business. I think this is a very circuitous and meandering kind of life we live in theater and design. And so I think everything informs everything else. And so I came to New York, graduated college, I came to New York. The plan was I was accepted in the Juilliard as an intern in the costume department. And so I was an intern during the day. I danced at night. And so I kind of I worked with designers and I worked with other people, and I just kind of really tried to explore the city and sort of see what the city was like, and working on commercials, working on theater pieces, working on all different kinds of things. And I met a lot of people at Juilliard. Most of those people I'm still friends with. Some of them work here now. Some I went to school with and other places. And so that kind of really, I would say, led the foundation for the rest of my life. And meeting all those people and working subsequently with other designers. And I had met a bunch of people who had gone to the Yale Drama School, and eventually every job I sort of was working on had been with a person who had graduated from the Yale Drama School. So I kind of had set my goal was to sort of spend 5 years of New York, Chicago, LA, seeing what the different parts of performance was like, design was like. I also was doing production design stuff, like, and all different kinds of different things. But ultimately, the end goal was that I wanted to go back to graduate school at the Yale School of Drama and major in design. So,
Now
and that happened. So.
Before then, you had a stop at Saturday Night Live, though, right?
Before, yeah. So what had happened was I was in New York, and I met one of my dear friends who I'd gone to school with, Melina Root, and so she was at Juilliard as well, and so was I, and so then I left to go to LA for about a year, and she stayed here, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do while I was in LA. And she had just been hired as an assistant on Saturday Night Live. Lauren Michaels was coming back. They had a whole new design department, and they had just hired a new designer from the Yale School of Drama named Pam Peterson. And Pam had hired my friend Melina. And she was like, look, I'm working on the show. You should come and do it. We need a guy to come. It would be great. And I was like, do I want to live like I'm in LA? It's the sunny life and all that sort of stuff. Ultimately, I was like, okay, sure, fine, I'll come back. And so I moved back, not really knowing what Saturday Night Live was. I didn't I feel so stupid saying this, but I didn't really. I grew up not really knowing what Saturday Night Live was. I sound like an idiot, but it wasn't on my register. Like the first sort of reference I heard of it was a friend of mine who I went to grade school with. He wanted to do a class project, and we were in 9th grade at the time, and he was like, "There's this new program, and they do this thing called the fake news and the weekend update. So we're going to do our project like that." It was like a current events thing. I was like, "Okay, sure." And that was kind of the first time I heard about it, and I just sort of went on my merry way after that, and then sort of heard again about it. Like I was in college, and it was like '83, and we were sort of, I think it was the Madonna. Madonna was, so we had to stop what we were doing and watch the Madonna thing. And so there were like little moments here and there about doing SNL, but it never really was on my register. And I think partially because also I thought as a costume designer you do theater. There wasn't what is the TV aspect of doing costume design for television. And ultimately, after I said yes, I came back and was here for 3 years. She left after 1 year, I think 1 or 2 years, I can't remember, to go to Yale School of Drama.
So were you just like an assistant costume designer?
So I was
when you came on?
Pam was the head costume designer. Melina was one of the assistants, and I think my title was like PA / shopper / assistant, something like that. So.
So wait, not having watched the show and then you get here, like what is your first week like? Because it's a crazy.
It's crazy.
turnaround.
And I will say it's completely different now than it was then. And I've been here for forever. So then, the cast was half the size it is now. And the process was completely different. And the building was set up completely different. And it was, there wasn't as much change going on, and there wasn't, the scripts were sort of not set, but they were, I remember just sort of like, they were, you went out and you bought a suit. it wasn't like, okay, we'll go and buy 6 suits because we're not exactly sure what's happening, and the whole show has changed and grown, and the last minuteness of the show has gotten much more intense and much bigger now than it was before.
Were there any costumes or characters that really stuck out for you from that kind of late 80s
Well,
period?
I mean, like I was here, so it was the Dana Carvey years. So like all the, he was here and it was Jan Hooks and Nora and Phil Hartman and Dana. And so it was that new cast. And so it was like Church Lady was here. And so any of those things were like, oh my God. I think the first show, I remember it might have been Sigourney Weaver or something, one of those kind of things. And I was like, oh wow, Sigourney Weaver's standing right there. Like, let's, I look at that and I was like, oh, I was such a naive person from the Midwest, like having no idea what half of that, half of any of it really ultimately was.
So at that point, was there like a large archive of costumes in the late 80s then?
No, not at all. I mean, and there wasn't a lot of stock, and they had gotten rid of it because a new designer had come in. So she wanted to put her visual stamp on it. So in doing so, I know that they had gotten rid of a lot of things. It's not like now. I mean, we have closets and archives, and every cast member has an archive, and every cast member who's ever been here has boxes of their costumes in a warehouse in Brooklyn, and it's become a machine now, so to speak. It wasn't quite a machine back then, and it was much more loosey-goosey, and this room that we're sort of in, at one point would have held like 10 people, because that's how small the whole operation was.
Okay, so before we move on, do you remember anything about pulling the Church Lady outfit together?
No, and the Church Lady, it was a combination of, I didn't have anything to do with it. One of the things I remember having to do a lot was find Dennis Miller his ties for Wicked Update. I do remember that was sort of one of my jobs. So.
Any particular requests that he had? Or
No,
anything?
and I just that's one of the things I just vaguely remember. I don't remember, it's like you get your assignment and you go out and you sort of do it. And I remember going to this store called Mo Ginsburg, which was like on 5th Avenue and 21st Street or something on the 8th floor. And it was just a giant sort of warehouse of sport coats and suits, and that's where we used to go. It was sort of the precursor to, say, like Today's Man or Jose Banks or one of those places, but it was called Mo Ginsburg, and there was a store across the street called Bancroft. And so, I do remember certain things about certain places and certain areas, but I don't necessarily remember specifically getting certain things for certain people.
Okay, so then you go to the Yale School of Drama.
So then I leave and go up to the Yale School of Drama, and I'm there for 3 years. And by this point, my friend Melina had come back to Saturday Night Live and had taken over the design job here. And she's the 3rd year, I'm a 1st year. And she comes back, and I'm up there, and they're trying to make me a set designer. And so I was doing a lot of set design work and costume design work, and I graduate, and then I kind of have to figure out what I'm doing. Am I coming to New York? Am I going to California? I'd been offered a job with this designer. Her name was Rita Ryak. Rita, I mean, she's done a lot of big things, like she did Casino, and she worked with De Niro a lot. And she had called to, and I had known her, and she had called me to work with her on a De Niro film that he was in and directing, and I wish I could remember the name of it, but I can't. And so I was contemplating doing that, and then my friend Melina called and said, hey, why don't you come back and work on the show? And I was like, well, I've already done the show. Why do I want to come back? She goes, look, here's the deal. I'm going to leave in a couple years because her husband lived in California. And so she was like, I need to really be in California with him. And that's where my life needs to be. And I'll be here for a couple years and then you can take over the job. I was like, well, I'll do that only on the condition that I can like leave and do my own projects and do theater pieces, because it's sort of like, why go to school to become a designer if, I'm going to come back and assist for a couple years. So she made good on her word and she left, and I was doing other projects, and so ultimately got to the point and got a call from the office to sort of be like, hey, Lauren wants to talk to you. So I was like, okay. So I came in and talked to him, and he was like, well, do you want to do the job? I was like, yeah, I want to do the job. He goes, okay, great. So let's do it. And that was, 20 some odd years ago, a long time ago.
So having already been here for a while, were there things that you knew you wanted
Oh,
to
completely.
change?
Well, I mean, it's funny. You know, that's the thing I always find interesting about making the leap from assistant to designer. You think, no matter how long you've been an assistant, that, oh, it's easy, the transition between the two, but it's not. It's a lot harder to jump from, even if you've been at a place forever and I had been here before, left, came back, and had been doing my own thing. And so, I sort of had worked here for 5 years, more or less. And, it's hard to jump into being the boss, and that's something that they don't really tell you and teach you at graduate school or many places. It's that the assistant to the boss thing takes time, and it takes time to grow into being the boss and learning your own strengths and weaknesses and how you create a team around you to help you, and it's how not to fail, how to fail, where to fail, what to do. I mean, all of those things are really important about becoming a boss and becoming a good boss. And it does take, and it takes time. But Saturday Night Live is a place where they don't have a lot of time. So you're just sort of, you're thrown in, you do it, and you're learning quickly on the job. And every week is a learning curve. Still is, you think, after all of these years, it would be old hat, but it's not, and it's still every week is a new challenge, a new thing to sort of face, and a new, like, we sort of go, oh wait, I thought we had learned everything by now, and it's not. Every week there's some new challenge that we're trying to figure out, whether it's like last year or 2 years ago, the royal wedding that we had to do, and it's the hardest thing we've ever had to do, and everyone will agree in our department. It's the hardest thing. That we knew we were doing a royal wedding sketch. Was on a Saturday, so we couldn't really prepare anything because we had no idea. There was no idea what any of them were going to wear or any of that. So we all woke up at 5 a.m. to check it out and see everything, and then like, oh my God, where are we getting all that stuff? How's that going to happen? How, like, literally it was just like, how is it all going to come together? Like, the stores didn't. So we got here at 8 a.m. and we just started powwowing and just trying to figure out who was doing what, how we were going to create the certain things. There were certain things that we were trying to pre-order and pre-do based upon other things that they had worn previously to different weddings or to different things, but none of that came to be. So we had ordered all this stuff, which was just sort of like, well, they went a different way, so now how are we going to fix that? And someone was on trim, someone was on figuring out the uniform, someone was figuring out the hat, someone was figuring out where to get that, and it was the hardest thing we've ever had to do, was create the royal wedding in 10 hours.
Amazing.
Yeah.
How big is your team? How many people are working on it?
So the team grows and expands according to the days of the show. So I have a co-designer I work with. His name is Eric Justian, and so he and I sort of do everything. And do everything more than for the designers. And then there's 3 assistants. and they all, two or more shopper assistants, and then one is a coordinator assistant. So she does more of the bookkeeping and the uniforms and the political stuff, and the other two do more of the shopping kind of stuff. And then the way in which the department has changed was because of the film units. Once Andy came on and was doing the whole film, the Lonely Island Guys, that sort of stuff, that's a big way in which Saturday Night Live has changed over the years, is that they had their own unit, and they had a designer who was sort of assigned to them, and it was very renegade, and sort of year by year, moment by moment, that part of the show has grown. And so now there's 3 units, there's 3 directors. Each director has their own sort of designer assigned to them. There's someone who oversees the whole film unit. Eric and I oversee her. So it's sort of, so because it's a very organic way, and we're all very organic in the way we work, and we just sort of everyone kind of does everything. You're like, oh, I need that. Okay, here's like 5 things I pulled for the host. I don't need them right now, so do you need them for your sketch or whatever? And so, but that film unit is a big amoeba of a unit that has grown since the show has started. And that's in and of itself. And then we have the live show. So they have 3 directors, 3 producers, 3 designers, and then there's like 3 assistants for that whole unit. And then the live show and this is just the design part of it. This isn't the wardrobe part of it. And then we have Eric and myself, and then 3 other people, plus PAs.
Wow.
So it's a big thing, but you have to understand, we produce anywhere between 75 and 125 costumes per episode, and that's not counting the film episode. That's not counting the film department. So, and that's done in 2.5 days.
So walk us through, like, from the beginning of the week to showtime.
So the beginning of the week is Monday. Monday's sort of a catch-up day on some level. So Monday we're sort of getting rid of the last previous show with wrapping up all the returns, wrapping up all the paperwork, and getting things done. I start prepping the photo shoot and dealing with the ideas of what the promos are going to be and what are the photos going to look like. So that's sort of my day on Monday.
Have you met the host by that point?
I had not met. The host doesn't come in until 5 o'clock on Monday. But I have to start getting an idea of what's going on and what sort of ideas we may want to do for the photos. I generally will take a look to see kind of what they've been wearing lately, what kind of idea, like if they've been on the red carpet lately, if they've been here. Usually a lot of them are coming by way of a press junket, so there's a lot of photo imagery that's come out because they've been doing a lot of press. So I kind of need to see what things they've been wearing so I don't duplicate them. And make sure we have our own look for our own show for that particular thing. So that Monday is sort of dealt with that, and pulling clothes and going to the stores and starting to pull clothes for the photos. Tuesday, and then Monday night they start talking about the promos, which we start shooting on Tuesday. Tuesday afternoons about 3 we start shooting the promos, and they go on the internet, they go on Facebook, there's a couple of them on TV on Tuesday night, and those are generally a host plus 2 or 3 cast members. Sometimes it's different. The concept is always slightly different. Sometimes they scrap the whole concept that I worked on Monday and come in on Tuesday. Like, so we're just going to simplify it now. We're just going to make him, she's just going to wear jeans. I'm like, okay, great, fine, whatever. It's all good.
So do you do a quick fitting with the host like Monday or Tuesday?
No, so the first time I'm actually meeting them and talking to them and doing all that kind of stuff happens Tuesday, right before we do these promos. So I have a rack of clothes sort of set aside for that. I meet them, and sometimes things need alterations, sometimes don't. The promos haven't been terribly complicated this year. Last year they were a little more involved and a little more complicated. This year they've been a little less than that. So do that Tuesday. So Tuesday morning comes more bold clothes, do things, organize, where we're getting certain things for the photos and doing a whole checking the web and just kind of doing that. And then I have off Wednesday morning unless there's more stuff to kind of coordinate. Like today, I'm prepping for the photo shoot with Sandra, which is tomorrow. And so I spent the whole morning pulling clothes at different places, showrooms, and getting ready for that. But generally, I have Wednesday morning off until about 2. And then we come in and then we start read through around 3:30, and read through lasts until about 8. And then that's where we read about 40 sketches. We end up picking about 15 of them. And so after read through, we go into a meeting, pick the show, come back, and then we sit at a table. The hair, makeup, wardrobe, costumes, all the actors, all the writers come in, and on one side of the room is us, and then the set designers are on the other side of the room, and it's just a way for every group of writer and actor to come in and talk about their sketch, and that's when we talk about what it's going to look like, what kind of wig they want, what kind of just sort of the general look and feel of everything. Sometimes they have ideas, sometimes they don't, sometimes they have really specific ideas, sometimes they've written in the script, sometimes that doesn't make sense what they've written. So it's the first time we kind of all try and collectively figure out what this whole thing is going to be.
And are you like showing them photos on your phone?
Well,
or?
sometimes, yeah. So sometimes during read through, they'll say something and I'll do a sketch on the piece of paper, or based upon like something they're hearing, or something I'm hearing, or sometimes they have a reference of something, so I'll quickly look on my phone to pull up some kind of reference. And so between a sketch and them talking and me sketching at the same time and Eric making, we're all like kind of jamming to kind of see. And sometimes they have a picture on their phone. Sometimes I'll quickly be like, wait, do you mean like this or like this or like, you know? And then after that, I come down here. All that takes place upstairs on 17, and then I come down on, it's probably about 10 o'clock by this point, Wednesday night, and I start making these cards, which are our shopping cards, and it's sort of, it's a card that has the actor's name, the character, the sketch, and just sort of a general idea of what I think that particular outfit should look like. Red sweater, khaki pants, sneakers, or some sort of 1980s blue floral Midwest, or some, you know, sometimes JCPenney / Macy's, or, you know, some sort of inspiration that I'm thinking about that particular thing. I'll go back and reread the sketch, and based upon then talking with the actors, I'll do some stuff on the computer, trying to compile a little bit of ideas, so that I can go over everything with my assistants in the morning. And so after that, go home, go to bed for a couple hours, come back, come here by 8 o'clock Thursday mornings. Organizing again, trying to make sure all the things are together, doing some more last minute research, and then have a meeting with everybody to kind of start to get the day started and sort of divvy up who gets what and who's going to shop for what. And there's 4 of us who are out shopping. And we all kind of divvy up however we need to divvy things up.
So do you have in your head like what you already have in the wardrobe?
Well,
or do you walk through?
Yes, so there's some stuff, yeah. I kind of try, and it's all like sort of, so between myself and Eric, we kind of know what is here, and then my job is also to kind of memorize what the stores look like. And if I've seen something, or like, you know, one of my games I like to play with myself is to memorize the floor of shopping department stores, so that I can kind of walk through and like, okay, so now I'm at Saks on the 5th floor, And right, I'm in the DVF section. So right behind the DVF section is the Red Valentino section, which is next to the theory. So in the theory section, go to like, and then next to that, there's Rebecca Taylor. So in the Rebecca Taylor, there's a blue floral print dress. You know, that's the idea or whatever. So, you know, some of that stuff can be done on the internet now, but
So are you in like department stores and vintage shops?
it's like we go everywhere. Like I love shopping at the Salvation Army as much as I like shopping at Barney's. Like it just, clothes tell a story. You know, sometimes Salvation Army, it's more interesting because there's a little more history. Like you can pull something out and go, okay, I know that person. That person who wore this sweater is this. You know, it's sometimes a little harder in a department store because the thing doesn't have that history yet. It's just a little more generic. So you have to create a bigger history with something from a department store than in a vintage or Salvation Army or that kind of stuff. So,
Okay, so then you bring clothes back, and then what happens?
so we bring clothes back, and you know, and while we're doing our job, like everybody's doing their job. Like the writers are doing their job, the actors are doing their job. If we have the photo shoot, sometimes the photo shoot's on Thursday, so then my morning then becomes the photo shoot. And then after the photo shoot, we do another set of promos on Thursday afternoon. So sort of my morning is taken up by photo shoot and promos, and so by 4 o'clock, that's kind of when I can go back to engaging with the show. And I sort of run as fast as I can out the door so I can start doing my cards and my shopping. You know, everyone's rewriting and they've gone. Some of the early rewrites start coming in and sort of be like, okay, so now we're starting to change this and we want to do this. And Thursdays become a little more like after 4 o'clock, the energy shifts to deal more with the film unit things because they usually go out either Thursday night or very early Friday morning. So the whole thing starts shifting a little. It starts tilting a little to engage the film stuff a little more. And then we pull clothes, we're pulling clothes, we're buying clothes, everyone's out doing their thing. And we're here until about probably 10 o'clock Thursday night. And then come back Friday with a set of rewrites and changes, and we start again, Groundhog Day Part 2. We start at 8 a.m., have another meeting at 9 to go through what we all felt we accomplished, or what we're still missing, what we think is missing, what we want to do, and continue everything. And then around 6 o'clock, we start doing fittings Friday night. So we do sort of fittings between 6 and midnight. Cast members come in and out. Nothing's really scheduled. People just sort of drift in and drift out. And sometimes we get them for the whole time. Sometimes we get them for a little moment. Then they have to go back and rehearse. Then they come back. And so it's a very, like I said, organic, like it just kind of, things just are happening. You know, things just sort of, it all just kind of flows. And then I do the fitting with the host generally sometime between 8 and midnight, Friday night. And that, you know, things change, things morph, ideas and all that sort of stuff. And so go into a meeting to talk about the show Friday night around midnight, and I get home around 1, I guess, Friday night. And then start at 8 o'clock Saturday morning again. Have another meeting at 9. We go through everything again, what came by way of the fittings and what we still need and what we have to change out. And you know, we start rehearsal at 1 o'clock on Saturday. And that's sort of the first time we'll see the hair and the wardrobe and everything together and it's as much wardrobe as we have possible at that particular moment. Sometimes we're just getting things on them for the first time if it's being made or something like that. And we watch it on the monitor and see what happens, and we change things and, you know, sort of be like, oh my God, wait, 2 people are standing next to each other who are wearing the same outfit, or, you know. So that's kind of the first time we see everything together. And we're just adjusting things all the time and adjusting things. And then we have a dinner break around 5:30, We have a list of notes that we've been taking through the day, and change things, morph things out, and then do a dress rehearsal at 8 o'clock on Saturday. And then that's the first time everything is officially all together, and we run it exactly like a show. It's usually about 25 minutes longer than the live show. And then it comes down around 10, and we go into a meeting, refigure the whole show around again, cut usually around 4 sketches, and start the whole thing over.
So the wardrobe that gets cut, you just keep all that, or does
Yes.
anything get returned?
Well, they've already, if it's already been, most of it's already been worn and altered, and so no, it goes into other people's closets, or it goes into the warehouse, or it goes somewhere. And that's stuff that's not returnable because it's already been worn.
And do the hosts and performers usually have a lot of input on the costumes?
They
or
do. I mean, it's a collaboration. So that's like, do they have a lot? I mean, everyone. I don't know.
Has anyone ever said no to anything? I refuse to wear that.
Maybe in jest, maybe in not. Who knows? I don't like everyone. But my job is to make everyone feel comfortable. So it's sort of like it's a thing where it needs to tell the story. It needs to be, the performer has to wear it. So they're the ones who, at the end of the day, the performer is out there, and they're the people who have to be comfortable. So they're the ones, if something's wrong, they'll be able to feel it in their costume. And so at the end of the day, they have to be happy with it.
Do you ever worry about budget?
Yes, budget is always, it's always a consideration, but at the end of the day, sometimes because of this show and the last minuteness of this show, the budget sometimes is greater than we would like it to be.
Does Lauren weigh in on a lot of stuff with looks and costume?
He does weigh in on every look, not until dress rehearsal. My job is to get everything together and to keep him informed as to what's happening, and if he has questions about anything, to make sure he knows what's going on. But it isn't until dress rehearsal that he finally, and that's kind of the way we all look at it, is that's the moment where we can really see, oh wait, the wig's not working, and because everyone's still adjusting. The afternoon rehearsal is the first time of seeing stuff, and we go, oh yeah, let's adjust that. That can be, and then so finally, for the real dress at 8 o'clock, it's go time.
So for dress, are you doing the quick changes like in a minute and a half? Or
Yeah, all of that we do it exactly like a real show, and so we have to make sure it all happens in the way in which and can be done in like a live show.
So talk about that. How do you lay it all out ahead of time and how many dressers are dressing
Well,
everybody?
you have to think every actor has their own dresser, more or less, because we're never sure exactly how the show is going to work, and we always have to make sure everybody can do the change and everybody can make those changes and that sort of stuff. The host has 2 dressers, plus a wig person and a makeup person, and so every actor also has their own dresser and their own hair person and their own makeup person. And you just have to make sure you've designed an outfit and it's workable in like 2 minutes, a 2-minute change. Sometimes it comes down to, for the air show, much more so than the dress show. The dress show is always, no, well, let's see if it can happen first. I'd rather, before we start compromising on things, let's see if it can happen. And if it can't happen, then we'll be able to figure out, we have a little bit of luxury on the dress show that we don't have in the air show, so that the air show ultimately, sometimes we have to make some adjustments, like particularly more so with the host, and some of his changes or her changes become shorter, and the host has the shortest changes, much more so than regular cast members. Sometimes we can go, look, they can wear the same pant between that sketch and that sketch, or they're not going to see the pant, they're underneath the table, so don't bother changing the bottom half, just change the top half. And so we make sure we work all that stuff out beforehand.
So does that mean like a lot of zippers and Velcro, not so many buttons kind of a thing?
Correct, exactly. A lot more Velcro and zippers than not a lot of buttons. But, you know, I mean, the host tends to have more, particularly their monologue. We don't like to rig things because it looks better if it's not rigged.
So, how are you mentioned you had actors' cards, but how are you tracking, can everybody actually do this? Like, you're keeping track of all the cast members, all the hosts, how much time is in between. Does a sketch ever get moved because you need
Well,
more
that's
time?
exactly 100%. So that part of that stuff happens Friday night and Saturday. So Friday night we set the show for dress rehearsal, and some of it is set in an order because they can't make changes for certain things, like certain, you know, I'll need 2.5 minutes for a change, or I need 5.5 minutes for a change, or 7 minutes for a change if it's a very complicated makeup and hair and a very involved, you know, Aquaman costume with any of that sort of stuff. And so all of that, we need more time. So in the meeting upstairs, I'll be like, well, we can't do that there. I need 7 minutes for that change. So let's figure out where I can get the 7 minutes between a commercial break, a film, a sketch that someone may not be in. That could give us our 7 minutes, and therefore we could do that sketch here. You know, so it is an interesting puzzle of move this graph over here, move that graph there, change that person over here, you know, and you know, sometimes it gets complicated because the air show we go into sometimes long, and so that's why sometimes you'll see some chaos happening toward the end of the show. And my job is to make sure everyone can make sure their changes they can get to, and you know, if for some reason they've done something, we have to then figure out how they can, you know, get into some version of that costume pretty quickly.
So are the quick change booths just right next to stage?
No, well, so it depends. There are a couple quick change booths, like real booths in the studio, and there's like 4 or 5 around different places in the studio, but the host always has first dibs on those things. The cast members' real quick change booths are all out in the hallway, which is right behind here. Sometimes they have time to get there, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're just changing clothes in the middle of the set. Behind the set, you know, I mean, it's up to the dresser to figure out where the best place is for them to change so that they can make the change. Sometimes they like to travel to the set first and then change everything there. Sometimes they like to change and then travel. You know, it's up to the dresser there to figure all that stuff out so that the actor doesn't have to worry about any of that.
And where are you during the live show?
I'm right over there, and walking around the hallway and just sort of walking on set, that sort of stuff. But I kind of had to be at a place where people can find me so that they can give me a piece of information. And the control room's just next door, so I can go in and out of the control room pretty quickly and find out what's happening, whether we're expanding time-wise or contracting or what we think is going to happen.
So does that mean maybe you'll lose like a necklace or something if you had to?
Well,
something
sometimes I
that-
mean,
like something would take up
it's
time?
generally more than a necklace. It's more like, don't change the bottom half. Just put them in this shirt, and it will be fine.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, so then the live show ends. Then is it stuff has to get returns to rentals or laundry?
So yeah,
or-
so all that stuff starts happening. That stuff happens Sunday. So there's a whole other crew who comes up and deals with the laundry and the rentals and putting the clothes into the dry cleaners and all that kind of happens on Monday. And that's a whole different department. That's the wardrobe department's job. That has nothing to do with the design aspect. And so the good thing about this show versus episodic is that when the show comes down Saturday night, you can just release it. You don't have to think about it again. So unlike episodic, which is ongoing and you have to constantly think of it day after day after day until the first day you start shooting, until the last day of shooting, you never can not stop thinking about the show. This one, because the time frame is so short, it's like once you start it on Thursday, once you start Wednesday and end it Saturday night, done. You don't have to think about it because the whole thing starts over, and there's no planning. There's nothing you can do to pre-plan or pull or any of that sort of stuff. So it's fresh starting Monday. So it gives you a little headspace clearage for Sunday.
We talked a little bit off camera about how technology has impacted the show over the years. Talk a little about that.
Well, yeah. So when I first started, one of my jobs when I first started here back in the late 80s was to go to the library all the time in a place called the Picture Collection. So I used to run there Thursday mornings when they first opened at 10 to do research on gypsy costumes or some sort of political figure or any of that kind of stuff. And now, because of the computer and everything's on the computer, it really does impact. You have at the click of your finger any given moment a whole array of picture collection according to Google, and just type in things and things start popping up. And so it's amazing just sort of that technical aspect, and to be able to find things in Iowa that you didn't think existed that you can call overnight and have them FedExed out and all that sort of stuff. Those things you used to have to hunt and peck for in New York, and now it's just at 2 a.m. when you can't sleep, you can just go on the computer and start like ordering things and changing things out. Also cell phones, cell phones with cameras and all that sort of stuff. You can be in a department store and someone can shoot you a picture and sort of be like, hey, what do you think of this? Or should we change the shoes? Or does this fit? Do you like the way this fits? Should we change the way, all of that sort of stuff. That technology to get that piece of information instantly now has changed the way this whole business works and basically life works. When I first started, I used to have to call in every couple hours while I was out shopping because there weren't cell phones and there weren't pagers or any of that sort of stuff. And then eventually we all got pagers, and so if there was a change or something that needed to happen, we got an instant page and would have to find our dime and or quarter. I think it was a dime actually, to some payphone in the middle of the subway to call in and sort of be like, hey, I just got to pay, what's up? Oh, well, they've just added these this and this, so we need to get 4 more blazers. And so that now you can just be like, the whole idea of texting and shooting pictures is both amazing and problematic, because it also means you're available 24 hours a day now. So people can also be like, hey, we just at 2 a.m, hey, we just rewrote this sketch. We're making all of these changes. So, it's like all things, a blessing and a curse.
So you mentioned Royal Wedding. Are there other particular sketches that were real challenging for costume?
Well, anytime we have to do like mascot costumes or foam costumes or that, because we don't have that technology here,
So
we
like
tend
the
to have
Justin Timberlake ones?
Yeah, we have to farm that stuff out, and they're always a little bit of tricky when someone else is kind of, you do a sketch and you're hoping that they're gonna follow the sketch, and we did a snowflake sketch once where they were dancing snowflakes. It was Vanessa and Adie and John Goodman, I think. And that was an interesting, because we didn't have, that was another one of those things, is the actors didn't have those costumes until dress rehearsal. So for rehearsal, because we were making them and they were these 3-dimensional foam, plexiglass, snowflake, I don't know, dancing costumes, they were intricate, and we had to make sure they were dry in time and all that sort of stuff. So, and we have 3 people in the back over there working on them. It just took longer than we thought that they were going to be, and so for dress rehearsal we had to give them, we gave them poles to hold, because we were like, well, this is how wide the costume is, so you guys have to know the way in which it's choreographed. You're just running into each other right now. The costume is as wide as your hands are. That's how wide the costume is. So put this pole and now hold it while you do the choreography. But that was one of those things that they didn't have the costumes for until dress rehearsal.
What about something like More Cowbell, where that shirt rating up really kind of made
well,
the sketch?
Will was so amazing at everything he did. So he was so committed to it. Like, there's no, you just sort of do the thing. You give Will the costume. He said, "This is great," and then he just takes it on, and it becomes a whole different. The costume creates its own life.
What about like mom jeans? Did they know exactly what they wanted?
So mom jeans, we did a whole thing with the mom jeans too. Having to create that shape and having to get much bigger jeans and then sort of give them butt pads and then really sculpt. So, opening up all the seams to get them to, form around their bottoms that way. Yeah.
The Californians?
The Californians was just, how do you? That was a good discussion between all the actors in that, and how do you do this sort of Californian telenovela kind of soap opera thing,
And Bill Hader did a quick change in the monologue, I think,
Oh
right into
yeah,
Californians.
that's exactly, yeah.
Was that a pretty typical quick change that we saw there?
That you saw on camera?
Yeah.
No, we don't. We tend not to. We tend not to do the quick changes on camera
But
very often.
the process of it, like
The
three
process,
people on
that's
him?
exactly the way it actually works.
Yeah.
It's and we were like, wait, but you do know, and Lauren was like, no, we'll just do the quick change on camera. We're like, oh, all right. Well, if everyone doesn't mind seeing it, and Lauren was like, no, people love to see that happen. That's like, people love to see that magic. That's part of the magic of the show. So why don't we just show them?
And then SNL does a lot of real life political people too.
Yes,
So
they
talk a little
do.
bit about Trump, making Alec into Trump.
Well, Alec has a lot to say about how he how he does Trump. We had a fat suit for him for a while because, and he wants, and Trump has, Trump's suits are very ill-fitting, so it was very important for Alec to make sure that the suits didn't fit him well. And he was very specific about that because the first few we tried on, he was like, "This is too nice. This is way too nice. No. Bigger, sloppier. This guy is not like, this is not, I don't want to, look at his suits. They're Italian, but they're really bad." I was like, okay. So, I was splitting that fine line between caricature and believability. And, sometimes people think that bigger is better, but it's not always that way. It's sort of, it's a fine line that we toe here. And, we say we're not the Carol Burnett show, and we're not that kind of big. Certainly there are times when we want that kind of bigness and that sort of parody, but for the most part, we try and be truthful and keep it as much and as accurate as we can. Like a lot of the ties for the real life political figures, we end up having to make the ties because, most of those guys don't go out every week and buy new ties. So some of their ties are 4 or 5 years old. So we're trying to duplicate ties which are 4 or 5 years old, and so we look at the pattern of it. A lot of times we end up making them.
The choice for the flag pin for Alec, was that from the writers or from you guys?
You mean the Russian one?
Uh-huh.
Yes, that was from the writers. Chris and Sarah did that, and those guys were so smart, and they're amazing head writers, and so that was their choice the first time to do that. So.
Why have you stayed with the show all these years?
That's a really good question. I have an amazing boss who gives me freedom to do other projects. Basically, he says, if you're happy, you bring happiness to the show. And if you feel like you need to explore and be creative and do that other places, then you bring that creativity back to the show. And so, every time I think about leaving, it's like, where do you go after you've been here? Like, it really is a place. And I've done a lot of other episodic television, and I've done other projects, and I do theater, and there's something about this pace. There's something about the creativity here. It's amazing people to work with. The writing's great, and like I said, Lauren's an amazing boss. So, sort of a combination, you also have the summer off, and so you forget how hard it is. And then you come back in September, you're like, oh yeah, wow, this show is really hard, isn't it? It's so hard sometimes. But yeah.
So I imagine the pacing is a little bit different. You've done House of Cards and 30
Yeah,
Rock.
I mean, it's interesting that the pacing of this show trains you unlike any other show. So if we can, and my motto now is like, look, we put a show together in 2.5 hours, in 2.5 days. I don't need 7 weeks to put a show together, So the luxury sometimes of having 7 weeks to create something is incredible. It allows you a lot of prep time and but it also, there's something about the way in which we work here, about the immediacy and how we get things done and how it all gets done very quickly and effortlessly, that I sort of bring to other jobs, and you're sort of like, well, wait, you can't do that. Why can't you do that? You have 2 weeks to do it? What? I don't understand. You can't find that chair in 2 weeks? Like, I don't, like, so.
And you've won an Emmy for costume design and for producing as well.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about getting into producing.
Well, I had, like I said, I have a great boss. And a couple years ago, I had an idea for the 40th anniversary to produce the documentary Live from New York. And sort of went to Lauren and said, look, I have this idea. I'd love to run it by you. And he said, sure, do it. And so I worked with a couple other people on that, and we produced this film, and it was great and interesting. And I think that led one thing to another, and Lauren eventually was like, hey, I think you should be a producer on the show. And he said, you do the job of a producer and anyway, so I think we should make you a producer. I was like, really? But I don't see, I'm the costume designer, yeah. I'm like not producer. But here's what I will say to most people about, so when I had produced this documentary, it was at Tribeca Film Festival, and so there was a luncheon, and I was sitting at a table, and this woman who was a producer turned to me and said, wow, you produce that, but you're a costume designer. And I said, she goes, isn't that a stretch? And I was like, well, no, actually, because the costume designer is the only person on the entire production of every show that knows everything that's going on. They know what the budget is, they know what the scripts are, they're dealing with the actors, they're dealing with the directors, they're dealing with the other producers, they're dealing with the set designer. They know everything of the entire production, what's happening. And so as a producer, that's what you do. You have to know everything that's going on the show. And so she's like, oh, okay, yeah, I never thought of it that way, but I guess you're right. And so I think because I was doing a lot of that hand-holding, and I work a lot with the host, and I'm there with the week and helping them with the scripts and realize their characters. And so I think eventually Lauren was very generous and was like, look, I think it's time that you become a producer on the show. I was like, no, I don't want that. I said, but I'm the costume designer. I don't want to be the producer. So it's like, it's not one or the other. You're going to do both jobs. I went, oh, if I'm going to do both jobs, okay, great. I'll do both jobs. I'd rather do 2 jobs than 1 job. So, yeah.
So we have to let you get back to your day, but so just last question, what advice would you offer to an aspiring costume designer?
What I would say to an aspiring costume designer is do everything. Don't ever say no to anything, and learn what other costume designers who you might be influenced by. Like, watch the movies, watch the old movies, watch TV, go to the theater, and sort of study what other people are doing and study what you're attracted to. And you may not know it, but there may be, certain movies you love, and they're all done by the same costume designer. And study that person and study how that person designs and why you're attracted to, say, that person versus somebody else, like why you might be I mean, in the movies, why you might be interested in the way Anne Roth designs films as opposed to the way Alan Mirojnick designs films, or the way, Sharon Davies designs films versus Jeffrey Carlin, or, I mean, and in TV, like, do you want to design TV shows like Sex and the City, like Pat Field, or do you want to design costumes like Saturday Night Live, or like Bob Mackie, who did the Carol Burnett show? Study those people, study and see what they did, and see how they came to be, and that will help inform you.
Who were some of your influences?
Um,
Everyone you just
Roth.
named.
Certainly, Bob Mackie is someone who was a huge influence of mine, and I kind of feel like, not that I'm the young Bob Mackie in any kind of way, but what he does, we sort of do a slightly different version of that, but the Carol Burnett show certainly was a huge influence on me, and the Mitzi Gaynor show, and everything that he kind of had ever done, the Sonny and Cher show, the Brady Bunch, and all those variety shows are incredible, and what he did and how he created that stuff, and we do a little bit of that, but not a lot of that, and he certainly was a huge influencer.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time
Yeah, sure,
today, Tom.
sure.
All right.